The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow across the Greendale Community Hall, a place where families had been gathering for nearly 5 decades. It was the annual Fall Heritage Luncheon, a slow, gentle event where neighbors shared old stories, homemade pies, and memories of the way things used to be. For many in the town, this gathering was a comfort, something familiar, something steady. And among these faces was a woman who had not known steadiness for much of her life. Sarah Whitford. Sarah, now in her mid-40s, carried herself with a quiet grace that came only from surviving storms most people never even guessed she had weathered. Her blue dress was modest, her hair neatly pinned back, and her smile gentle yet faint. She had come with the hope of simply enjoying the afternoon, blending into the background and catching up with the elders she had always admired. She didn't expect trouble. She didn't expect him. But trouble rarely sends warnings. Sarah stood by the refreshment table, arranging cups for the older attendees, something she always volunteered to do. It was a small task, but she enjoyed serving others, perhaps because, for many years, she had been the one overlooked, the one dismissed, the one treated as though she had nothing to offer. And then, through the warm chatter and soft piano music, a familiar voice cut the air, a voice she wished she'd never hear again. Mark Sullivan, tall, sharply dressed, and wearing the same smug smirk she remembered too well. Mark, her ex-husband. A man whose arrogance only deepened with age. He was not on the guest list. No one had invited him. But Mark was the kind of man who walked into any room believing he automatically belonged at the center of it. His eyes landed on Sarah instantly, almost like he had come searching for her. "Well, well," he said with a slow, mocking smile. "If it isn't little Sarah. Still playing the servant role, I see." A few of the older guests turned, sensing tension, but Sarah quickly forced a polite smile. "Hello, Mark. Didn't expect to see you here." "You never expect me," he said, shrugging as though his presence was a gift. "I heard about the luncheon and thought I'd stop by. You know, see old faces. Catch up." His eyes scanned her outfit, her hands, her expression examining her the way a critic inspects a flawed painting. "And some people," he added, "never change." Sarah kept her voice steady. At her age, she had learned to choose peace over confrontation. But Mark was not there for peace. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Heard things have been difficult for you." "Again," he said. "Must be tough, trying to scrape by after all those years of struggling. I mean, you always had talent for making poverty look dignified. I'll give you that." Sarah stiffened, but didn't respond. He wasn't done. "So where's your new guy?" he said casually. "Does he know he married a woman who couldn't even keep her first marriage together? Or does he think you're some kind of success story now?" Sarah inhaled slowly. Mark always knew where to aim, the places that used to hurt. But today, the wounds weren't open anymore. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice further, now speaking only for her to hear. "You used to depend on me for everything. And look at you now, still alone at a table, still trying to appear like you've got your life together. I'm thriving, Sarah. New business, new life, new everything." He tapped her cup stack lightly. "And you? Still barely making it work." Sarah looked at him fully now, really looked at him. His confident posture seemed almost forced. His words rehearsed, as if he needed her to believe he had won some invisible competition. She realized something. His taunts were not confidence. They were insecurity disguised as cruelty. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue, didn't defend herself. Instead, she simply said, "You don't know anything about my life anymore, Mark." "Oh, I know enough," he said, scoffing. "You married again, didn't you? Heard he's some middle manager somewhere. You sure know how to pick them. What did you do, drag him into your financial mess too?" Her jaw tightened. The old Sarah would have cried. But this Sarah had lived through storms that taught her one thing: silence can be stronger than shouting. "Mark, this conversation needs to end," she said softly. He laughed. Oh, come on. Let's not pretend you've moved on. A woman like you, struggling your whole life? You don't marry up. You marry sideways. Or down. That one stung not because it was true, but because it was the exact lie he wanted to believe. And just as Sarah opened her mouth to speak, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. Conversations hushed. People turned. Someone had entered the room. Through the wide double doors walked a man whose presence commanded attention without asking for it. Daniel Whitford, the CEO of Whitford Global Solutions, Sarah's husband, but more importantly, a man with a calm strength that comforted everyone around him. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. But there was something unmistakably powerful about the way he carried himself with confidence, humility, and assurance. He approached slowly, nodding respectfully to the older guests, stopping only when he reached Sarah's side. Mark turned and visibly jolted. Daniel was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. But it wasn't the suit that stunned Mark. It was the unmistakable air of someone whose life, influence, and stability outclassed Mark in every imaginable way. "Sorry I'm late," Daniel said warmly, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's back. Traffic was a little heavy leaving the city. Then he looked at Mark. A quiet, assessing look. Calm. Unshaken. "Hello," Daniel said. "I don't believe we've met." Mark swallowed. I'm Mark. Sarah's friend." Sarah's eyebrow lifted slightly, but she said nothing. "Well," Daniel replied, voice smooth but firm, "anyone speaking to my wife is someone I should be introduced to. My wife." The words hit Mark with the weight of stone. His eyes darted toward the window toward the parking lot. A car was parked right outside the entrance. Not just a car. A Maybach S680, polished to a mirror's shine, clearly driven here, not hired. A vehicle that cost more than most homes in Greendale. Mark stared at the car, then at Daniel, then at Sarah. The color slowly drained from his face. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult. He didn't brag. He simply looked at Mark with a steady, unwavering gaze, one that communicated everything without a single word spoken. "I know what you were doing. I know the kind of man you are, and I won't let you hurt her again." That quiet dignity weighed heavier than any insult Mark had ever thrown. For the first time since Mark arrived, Sarah felt her chest loosen, not because she needed rescuing, but because someone finally stood beside her, not ahead of her, not above her, but beside her with respect, with love, and with strength that supported, rather than overshadowed. She gave Daniel a small smile, frail but grateful. He returned it, warm and reassuring. Mark opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. He simply nodded awkwardly, muttered something about needing to get going, and backed away, his arrogance dissolving with every step. He left the hall quickly, head lowered, shoulders stiff, stepping past the crowd that had witnessed the quietest defeat imaginable. Cruelty had met dignity, and dignity won. Daniel guided Sarah to a quieter corner of the hall, away from the curious glances. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded. "I am now." He touched her hand softly, respectfully. "I should have been here earlier." She shook her head. "You came at the right time." And she meant it. The past often tries to return not because it has power, but because it hopes to reclaim it. But Sarah had changed. Life had shaped her. Hardship had strengthened her. And love, true, steady love, had grounded her. Daniel didn't need to shout, or fight, or boast. Sometimes, the strongest people are those who don't need to prove anything at all. Mark walked away, defeated, not by wealth, but by character. Later, as the luncheon drew to a close, Daniel offered his arm to Sarah. "Ready to go home?" She smiled. "More than ready." They walked out together, heads high. Guests watched through the windows as Daniel opened the door of the Maybach for her, not as a display of wealth, but as a gesture of respect. Sarah looked back at the hall one last time, not to remember Mark, but to remember how far she had come. And then, hand in hand with the man who saw her worth from the beginning, she stepped into a future free from the shadows of the past.